But anyway, here's the deal. The only acknowledged case of a coup d'etat in the United States occurred in 1898 in Wilmington, Delaware. I mean, Wilmington, North Carolina. Now, a coup d'etat, usually a lot of times it is shortened to coup, um, is when you have a violent overthrow of a duly elected government, and that actually occurred in Wilmington. Now, let me give you some backdrop because in order to understand what happened, we need to understand what was there. And here's the deal: it extends all the way till today. What occurred there? Um, Wilmington, North Carolina, is right in eastern, as this map shows, right there, right close to the ocean, as a matter of fact, and it's where Cape Fear River enters into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, one of the things interestingly about that is that there was a movie years back called Cape Fear, and I didn't know the history of North Carolina then, but this begins to make some sense now about Cape Fear. Now, Cape Fear in 1890s was a very prosperous town, a port town, meaning that they were able to take advantage of the ocean there and the river. Um, and here's the deal: about two-thirds of Wilmington's population was black, and it had a very strong black community with a significant middle class. Black people were business owners. They owned barbershops and restaurants, tailor shops, drugstores, also held positions as firemen and policemen. And essentially, the black people and the white people existed peacefully, but it was separated. It was still separated. But it was clear that the black people ran things in Wilmington. Now, this caused some problems in the state of North Carolina. Let me explain why, because this figures into how this ended up with a coup d'etat. Back at that time, the Republican and Democratic Party were reversed from what we know of today. The Republican Party was where the black people, uh, that's what they voted. They voted Republican. And the white people, the racist white people, they had the Democratic Party, and that had occurred because Lincoln was a Republican, and so black people coming out of the Civil War basically voted the Lincoln Party, which was the Republican Party. Um, so now, and so you have to keep that in mind because we've been so locked into being Democrats for so long. So we have to understand that the Democratic Party back then was racist as heck. And in up until 1896, the white Democratic Party had controlled the state politics. Okay? But in 1896, they lost control of the state politics. And that really, really pissed them off. So the white Democrats plotted to revenge that defeat because what had occurred was a working relationship between the black Republicans, the white Republicans, and a group called the Populists. But still need for you to understand how powerful the black folks were at that time. We had black folks not only in the businesses and elected officials in the town, also in the state, in the House of Representatives at that time. There were black folks elected to the Congress. So yeah, we were rocking and rolling because understand the Civil War had ended in 1865, and then you had what was called the Radical Reconstruction. That was from 1865 roughly to 1877, but it had in some places in the South we had kept rolling, and so uh, Wilmington and North Carolina was still strong in terms of black people moving forward. Okay, so in fact, here's a graphic of some of the U.S. congressmen, black ones from North Carolina. Okay, so as I mentioned, the Republicans were progressive at that time, and so they had in Congress uh, they merged with a group called the Populist Party. These were also progressives who had left the Democratic Party and they were being independent, but they realized that they needed to work with the Republican Party. Okay, and so they merged. So you got Republicans and the Populists, and they merged and they became what was called the Fusion Party. Okay, so that was black folks and white folks, liberal or progressive white folks. And the Fusion Party, they won the election in 1896 and basically were controlling the state politics. Here's a article from that time talking about that, and it says populist Republican fusion. The expected has happened since the publication of the editorial headed Selah in the Caucasian, I guess that was the name of a newspaper, Caucasian, of September 3rd. The public has expected that the Republican and populist leaders to get together on a ticket from top to bottom in North Carolina. All right. So the white Democrats said, "Oh, we'll fix this," and there were three of them in particular: Charles A. Koch and Alfred Moore Waddell, and Funifold. Look at that name, Funifold Simmons. He was the Democratic Party chair in 1898. Now, here's what they planned to do. The Democrats planned to reverse home rule. And what that means, home rule means local politics are through elections locally. So that, in other words, if you lived in Wilmington, the people of Wilmington elected the mayor and the officers of that local government. Okay? And that's what we know to be basically the deal in today in everywhere. The local citizens elect their mayors and their city treasurers and their city councils and all of that. That's called home rule. Well, the Democratic Party, the Democrats, they wanted to reverse that and making it be that local officials would no longer be elected but be appointed by the state. So imagine this in your city that all of a sudden you couldn't vote to elect your mayor, but instead the state government appointed your mayor. All right? That would take away home rule. So they began in the state legislature, started making laws to take over the state's judiciary, the judges, and they adopted 30 amendments to the state constitution, including lowering the number of judges on the state Supreme Court, putting the lower courts and local governments under the control of the state legislature, taking away the vote for certain types of, quote, criminals, and mandating segregated public schools, outlawing interracial relationships, and granting the General Assembly the power to modify or nullify any local government. Now, why this is important to understand is that today you have the Republican Party trying to do some of the same things, and including um, disenfranchising people of their vote. So, they haven't changed that much. They just simply changed parties. All right. So now, these three guys, they were the ringleaders of this. And so they started a campaign. And I want you to pay attention to how this campaign worked. They started having these meetings, right, with white men. And they were very clear it was for white men. Alfred Waddell, he was a former Confederate soldier and a white supremacist. And so the Democrats came out with all kinds of stuff. They went for the press. They went to all kinds of stuff. They had a conference. Okay. Now dig this. This is the Democratic Handbook of 1898. Brief statement of some fundamental and general principles of the Democratic Handbook. Look at this. This is what was in that handbook. It said to rule over white men. It is no fault of the Negro that he is here, and he is not to be punished for being here. But this is a white man's country, and white men must control and govern it. They must govern it not only because they are white men, but because they can do it better than the Negro. The Negro has, whenever tried, demonstrated his unfitness and inability to rule. It is better for the Negro as well as for the white man that the white man should make and administer the laws. It is a mercy to the Negro himself to save him from his own ruin. It has been in the past and is today the special mission. Now, you would think that kind of language and stuff, that there would be some kind of outrage, but it wasn't. That's why today, when you hear the present resident saying stuff, there's no real outcry from the white people. There's a few that say, oh, this sounds terrible, but it's no outcry, really. And so they went to the press as well. These are some of the kind of propaganda that they were running at that time. And it's important to understand, you see the images, right? One of the things you see, there it is, white supremacy plum. Wow. See, people think that the term white supremacy is new. No, it came from them. They're the ones who said it. Look at that. Resolutions adopted by 8,000 voters at the white man's convention in Goldsboro. See, they were organizing. They were organizing and they were propagandizing and putting out this image of the Negro, the black man, holding the white man down and dominating the white man and going after the white woman. See, because that was the next level, okay? The next level was about this idea of the black men raping white women. And so that's what happened. You started having them getting lynched, okay? You had the lynchings break out. See, understand, this was calculated. It was calculated. And then there was a woman named Mrs. Felton. I don't know what she did, but anyway, she gave a speech. a very famous speech. And in this speech, she talked about lynchings. And she said, here's what she said. She said, when there is not enough religion in the pulpit to organize a crusade against sin, nor justice in the courthouse to promptly punish crime, nor manhood enough in the nation to put a sheltering arm around about innocence and virtue, if it needs lynching to protect woman's dearest possession from the ravening human beast, then I say lynch 1,000 times a week if necessary. The poor girl would choose any death in preference to such ignominy and outrage, and a quick death is mercy to the rapist compared to the suffering of innocence and modesty in a land of Bibles and churches where violence is becoming omnipotent except with the rich and powerful before the law. Now that's some hate mongering stuff there. Okay? But here you got the white woman talking about the virtue of the white woman and how they need to be protected and how there was this lawlessness and need to be lynchings 1,000 times a week if necessary. See how all that stuff is building, right? Well, in Wilmington, there was a brother, a black man named Alexander Manley. This is him here. And I know he looks white. That's going to come up in a few minutes. But he had a newspaper called The Record, the Wilmington Record. And so he wrote a response to Mrs. Felton. And boy, here's what he said, among other things. He said, he was talking about the matter of clandestine meetings with colored men than are the white men. In other words, there was much more upset over colored men being with white women than there are the white men with colored women, mainly because it was still very much the thing that was, white men could still rape black women if they felt like it. But did what he said. Meetings of this kind go on for some time until the white woman's infatuation or the black man's boldness bring attention to them and the man is lynched for rape. Every Negro lynched is called a big, burly, black brute, when in fact many of those who have thus been dealt with had white men for their fathers and were not only not black and burly, but were sufficiently attractive for white girls of culture and refinement to fall in love with them, as is well known to all. Oh boy. So he wrote that and published it in his newspaper and basically called out the truth. Boy, them white men went crazy. Dig this. This is just one of the white newspapers' responses talking about a horrid slander, the most famous, that infamous, that ever appeared in print in this state. The alarmed politicians are trying to break the force of it by resorting to various, what is that? Dodges, but they are too thin. Wow. The infamous assault on the white women of this state, which appeared on the 18th of August in the Daily Record, the Negro paper published in this city, has aroused a storm of indignation from one end of the state to the other. Whew, boy. Yeah, they was upset. He said, how dare this Negro expose this? So what did they do? They called a series of meetings. Here's the thing. Attention, white men. There will be a meeting of the white men of Wilmington this morning at 11 o'clock in the courthouse. Now, remember I told you, in fact, what does it say? A full attendance is desired as business in the furtherance of white supremacy will be transacted. Remember, I told you that the town was Wilmington was 2/3 black, but here they are meeting like this, and they declared at that meeting a white declaration of independence. Wow. See, let's see what one of these things said. Number one, that the time has passed for the intelligent citizens of this community owning 95% of the property and paying taxes in like proportion to be ruled by Negroes. First of all, that wasn't true because remember, it was 2/3 black, and the black people were business owners, so they wasn't the white people wasn't paying or wasn't owning 95% of the property. See, so the same kind of lies that's told today by the present resident, and he gets into the papers. Now today he does it by tweet, but it still makes it into the mainstream media because they simply repeat his lies. Even if afterwards they say, well, it's an untruth or inaccurate, they still post it. Okay? So, oh yeah, then this other part. That we will not tolerate the action of unscrupulous white men in affiliating with the Negroes so that by the means of their votes they can dominate the intelligent and thrifty element in the community, thus causing business to stagnate and progress to be whatever. But now dig what they said. This was in the declaration. It said, and it's talking about the publisher of the record, the Daily Record, and that was Manley, brother. We demand that he leave this city forever within 24 hours after the issuance of this proclamation. And that's something. So he had to leave forever. Second, that the printing press from which the record has been issued be packed and shipped from the city without delay. Wow. And they said if it's refused or if no answer is given within the time mentioned, 12 hours or whatever, 12 hours, then the editor Manley will be expelled by force. Now think about that. You got these people, they said this Negro gotta leave town forever within 24 hours, and then we're gonna pack up the printing press and throw it out of town. Now that's some angry white men, right? So next, what happened? There was a group of men. They weren't called the Ku Klux Klan. They were called red shirts because they wore red shirts. There's a picture. It's in black and white, but that's what they were called, red shirts. And they gathered together with that dude Waddell and some others, and they went down to the yeah, there they are in front of the newspaper office, and they set it on fire. Set it on fire. Burn it down to the ground. Um, Now, interestingly enough, Manley got away at that point in time because basically he was very, very light. And so they thought he was a white man. So he was able to escape through the crowd and get away. Um, but eventually, what happened was there was over 2,000 white men gathered up. Now, the black folks didn't take that sitting down. You know, some of them went after them white men and said, "Oh no, 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 you ain't gonna attack us like that." And so they fought back, but they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. So the mob broke out the windows, set the newspaper office on fire, and now the mob of white people included clergymen and lawyers, bankers, merchants, And so this they called it a riot, but basically it was an attack that jumped off because these white men, once they burned down a newspaper office, they went and attacked the black community and attacked black people on the street. That's why they were fighting back. But now it lasted over a day, and there's still today a dispute over how many black people got killed. The white people say, oh, it was somewhere between 25 and 60. The black people say, no, it's more like a few hundred. Now, a lot of the black people, uh, they went into the swamp, the surrounding swamps and stuff, to hide out, and also in the graveyard. But they killed a lot of black people, and the rest, quite a few others, left and never came back. Now, remember, I told you it was two-thirds black population. Before that, after 1898, it dropped down to just the opposite, where it became two-thirds white. And they made all of the all of the elected officials, the black ones and the white Republicans and the fusionists, made them all resign and leave town. And they took over the city government. They took it over. They staged a coup d'etat, a violent overthrow of the elected government. And they did it and they were happy. And you can see these headlines, everything goes white. Judges, congressmen, solicitors, that's lawyers, right? White supremacy. Okay? They took it over. Wow. And when they took it over, they ran the black folks out, and then they hid the story for years and years and years. Um, Now, what happened in Wilmington became basically an affirmation of white supremacy, not just in Wilmington and not just in the South, but in the whole country. White supremacy, this was like an example of what you could do. They literally staged a coup d'etat, and they just, the idea of whiteness, uh, it eclipsed the legal citizenship and the rights of black people and equal protection that was supposed to be guaranteed under the 14th Amendment. They just wiped that out because that's what they do. And then in the history books, to give you an example of what they did. Remember I told you about the three guys, one of them was named Acock? Here's from a history book in North Carolina. Friend of the Negro. Though Acock was in favor of an amendment to take away the vote from illiterate Negroes, he had no ill feeling toward their race. In fact, he was one of the best friends that the colored people had in the state. Oh, Jesus. But we know that's how they do with the history books. They do it all the time. They still do it. And then they went to work doing things like, okay, the amendment poll tax feature. They started rigging the elections and the polls and all of that because they took away our right to vote by doing stuff like putting a poll tax up, and then you had to take a test and all of that. And that stuff stayed until the 1960s, when you had the what do you call them, the people that went down south to register people to vote and stuff. And then in the later years, they've done stuff called gerrymandering. Now, this is in the 80s and 90s. They do gerrymandering, which is when you draw the maps. What you do, you redraw the maps, the electoral maps, to basically guarantee some people not being able to vote or at least to win in their district and guaranteeing others to win. Now, understand, we have flipped the script now by this time. Now you have the Republicans being the racist party, and the Democratic Party is the one that the black folks support. It's still racist, but it's the one where we're in it. Okay? So you had the Republicans doing all kind of shenanigans. And for those that don't know, the switch came in the 60s when black folks got to, especially in the South, got the right to vote. You had what were called the white Democrats that were racist before. They were called Dixiecrats. So all in the South, the white Republicans switched over to the Republican Party because the black folks came into the Democratic Party and asserted their numbers. And so the racists in the Democratic Party just said, okay, and left and went to the Republican Party. And that's how the Republican Party came to be the racist party today. And like I say, they gerrymandered. So now in North Carolina, they really did a job on it. And the Democrats basically sued over this gerrymandering, restructuring the vote, the map, so that the Republicans could dominate. In fact, if you look at what happened with um, the present resident getting elected, the way he got elected, even though he didn't win the popular vote, he was able to get enough votes in the Electoral College. And a lot of that happened because certain states were gerrymandered to give certain advantages to the Republicans, even if they didn't win the popular vote numbers. So they sued, and not too long ago, the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, said that partisan gerrymandering is beyond the reach of the federal courts. They said, no, we don't have nothing to do with that. That's up to the states. That's some real deep stuff, because in the past, the only place we had to go to force the states to recognize federal laws, like the 14th Amendment, was to go to the federal courts and end up in the U.S. Supreme Court. But that's why it was so important for the present resident and the Republicans to control who went on the Supreme Court, so that they could make decisions like they just did and say, hey, gerrymandering, that's a state issue. We don't get involved with that. Whew. So, right after that, the North Carolina State Supreme Court ruled that the maps were gerrymandered in a way that set the outcomes of the elections in such a way as to favor one party over the other. And so they demanded that, or they commanded that the maps had to be redrawn before the 2020 elections. Okay, they said that the General Assembly, Republican-controlled North Carolina General Assembly, had violated the state constitution when it gerrymandered legislative maps to stop serious competition for state House and Senate seats. See, this was a continuation. Remember what I said early on in 1898? They tried to get rid of home rule to make it be that the cities, the local governments, weren't elected by the people. Well, this is some latter day stuff, this gerrymandering, where no matter how you vote, it won't count because the state is controlling what's going on. So, what I said is the title is the truth. White people took over the government in Wilmington ran the black people out of town, and the whites that were sympathetic forced all the elected officials to, quote, resign and leave town, and they took over the governments, and they did it in the name of white supremacy. See, that's the part that really, when I started looking through this and researching this, is how boldly they went forward to calling it white supremacy. They weren't hiding it. They were out in the open saying, this is white supremacy. So today, when you see this stuff going on, it's when they say, remember what we heard them say, take America back? And you heard it when you saw the stuff in the 1898 when they were doing that. They were saying, take it back from the black man. The black man's dominating. The black man's this. The black man controlling it. Doesn't that sound familiar? Now today they include Mexicans and foreigners and what do you call them? Illegal immigrants and whoever they want. But they're protective of the white man. They say the white man gotta be dominant. And I said this before the last election, last presidential election. I said that what they're gonna do, I'm talking about white people, I said the white people want to elect a white man. They'll elect a dead white man before they would allow for a black man or a black person or a woman even a white woman, to be elected. And that's exactly what happened. They elected a racist man, white man, to be the president. So, and you've seen some of the same kind of things they were doing back then with the propaganda is the same kind of stuff they're doing today. That's why it's most important that we not lose sight of the fact that, yeah, we may not like some things, but we have to vote him out and vote all of them Republican racists out of there. Now is not the time to be talking about, oh, I ain't gonna vote because my vote don't count. Your vote counts more. If it didn't, they wouldn't spend so much time and money and trouble to prevent you from voting. They wouldn't be spending all this money and effort to throw us off the voting rolls in state after state after state. They've literally been throwing thousands of black people off the rolls. That's disenfranchisement. That's what it's called. It's disenfranchising us from our vote. So I closed out. I'm going to show a short video. And thanks to Vox.com for a lot of the information and graphics that I was able to use. But see, this is it. And after what you've seen and what you saw them do in 1898 in a state in this country, and then think about it, because these folks that you're going to hear in a minute, they know what happened and they know what's possible. As always, I say, no justice, no peace, no love. KNOW. Hey, Rimby, good to see you. And thank you to Shaka64 for your patience, Miss Drea, and the others who waited patiently for us to get the tech issues fixed enough to get this broadcast done. All right? Peace.
And those names. Turn on the news, and the state's long history of political suppression echoes.
And we turn to a strict new voter ID law in North Carolina. Racial gerrymandering and a push for new voting maps.
The court says the Republican-led legislature redrew congressional districts along racial lines, violating the Constitution.
There's a tremendous amount of intimidation that is still lax from voter participation.
The subliminal pursuit of continuing the White Declaration of Independence.
You don't see it for what it really is. It can happen all over